For me, my perspective is that English belongs to the world. It is a world language.
There's no such thing as bad communication in English.
We hear a lot about social media today, about how it's affecting different areas of our lives.
I think the difficulty is going to be really knowing whether what you're listening to is real.
People join us from Everest Base Camp, you know, that's just fantastic.
So see if you can top that.
You're listening to the British Council English Podcast, brought to you by the world's English experts.
Perfect.
Okay, welcome to the English for Life podcast, everyone. I'm here today with Neil, with Niraj. You've probably actually already seen them quite often on our YouTube channels. And we're talking about social media and English language learning. So the effects that social media has had on English language learning. So Neil, I think you told me you've been teaching 30, you told me not to say 31.
Something like that, a few years.
Many years.
Yeah.
So like real steadfast teacher here. Niraj, how long have you been teaching?
Around just under 20 years.
Okay, so collectively,
we've got about
50
over 50
years.
years experience.
Since before the days of the internet, never mind before the days of social media.
Okay, so we've got some solid guests on the show today. I love how I've just made it my show. It's not my show. But also, most interestingly, for the conversation we're having today, you both work a lot with social media today. Can you just quickly give like a one-sentence liner on what you do with social media right now?
Sure.
Neil?
I manage the social media channels for learners that the British Council has worldwide, and we have all the main kind of ones. We have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, X, and so on. And basically, we have millions of followers worldwide. I think 8.5 million, something like that. And I communicate with them every day. I'm online every day. Content and live events, everything like that.
Every day online?
Yeah, every day.
Niraj?
So I work with Neil and an international team of people who are working on our social media channels, posting materials for English language learners, and also participating in live events, live lessons. In fact, me and Neil collaborate on a Friday live lesson.
You guys should tune in, by the way. Fridays, what time?
Absolutely. It's at
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
UK time.
Yeah.
2 o'clock UK time, Fridays.
And it's all about, usually we're talking about writing skills for exams.
Voila. Actually, Gabriel, you were right. I don't know where he's gone. Gabriel was right about that. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you guys. Because you've been teaching, we said, around 30 years, 20 years.
Yes.
So you've seen a shift. You were teaching when social media came on the scene.
Absolutely.
So what I'm really interested to know is, we hear a lot about social media today, about how it's affecting different areas of our lives. I'm interested, how do you think, or how have you noticed that social media has affected English language, so teaching beforehand? So how has it affected you in your jobs?
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that it's affected teaching as much as it could have, because I'm not sure that teachers are always entirely on board with social media in that. But in terms of learners, it's had a tremendous effect. I was just saying to Niraj before we started, when I started teaching, there was no opportunity for learners in countries to communicate with other people in English in any way. The only English they generally got was in class at school or from cassette tapes. We may have to show a picture of that, because I don't know if people even know what cassette tapes are anymore. But now,
they're coming back in.
That's true. Yeah. Now people are communicating in English every single day through social media. They're linking up with groups of people who have the same interests as them. They're sharing their ideas. They're communicating in a real, a genuine communicative way, about their ideas, their thoughts, their opinions, whether they're, on a Taylor Swift board someplace, or whether they're on Reddit, or whatever they're doing. They're able to actually communicate in English, and read lots of English, watch lots of English, and interact with it in a meaningful way, which just wasn't possible when I started teaching. It just didn't exist.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I would say for teachers, from a teacher's perspective, social media has given us platforms where we can collaborate with each other, and also find a community where we support each other and share ideas. So it's been for me personally, having access to a group of teachers, like-minded teachers who are sharing materials and ideas and supporting each other, saying, well done for that, great work. I think that's really useful.
You're right. Yeah, that kind of community of practice among teachers has been a big benefit in the sharing. And we've got those, for example, the British Council Teaching English community, where you've got teachers from all over the world asking questions, sharing their problems, saying, what do I do about this?
And we publicise training and all kind of upcoming events as well. So it keeps people in the loop about what opportunities are available in developing their skills as teachers.
Yeah. But I just want to, one thing that you said, Neil, which kind of, just to see what you have to this challenge, but the fact that people are using social media, so here I'd be talking about learners, so they'd be using social media every single day to write in English, talk in English, etc. Is there a level, therefore, where there is a dilution of of English, in the sense that, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, because people have to use it a lot more frequently, and because it's so much more globalized, and because people aren't necessarily learning with teachers. Do you know what I mean? That there's a kind of maybe it's just an evolution of English, but one where it's.
You're talking about moving away from a standard.
Moving away from a standard, but then...
And people not knowing what the standard really is.
People not knowing what the standard is. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
And do you mean, like, in terms of the standard is in their writing, their production, or their speaking?
All of it.
All of it.
Yeah. And just as an anecdote, I mean, it's not necessarily completely linked to social media, but I remember going to an engineering school here in Paris, and everybody was, so they were all speaking English, but there was nobody in the group who had grown up speaking English. And so it was really funny because I entered into the room. Everybody was speaking English. They were French, Colombian, kind of from all over the world. And I started speaking, and they all just stopped and looked at me, and they were like, "We've never had like somebody who grew up in the UK come in here before." And they were like, "Your English is really different to ours." And they all spoke English fluently, but it was almost like another English had evolved. And so it's not that example isn't specifically linked to social media, but I can see how that would happen. Like you were talking about gaming English, like people speaking on gaming and using abbreviations all the time, and that just sinking into everyday English.
I think you're touching on the topic of who does English belong to, and does it belong to the native speakers of English? And I mean, that's another massive area of research and debate. For me, my perspective is that English belongs to the world. It is a world language, and people use it as they need it, as they need to, in order to communicate the ideas that they want to. And as long as everybody understands each other, that's fine.
But then why teach English if there's no standard? If you can do anything you want with it?
Well, it's not a case that you can do anything you want with it all the time. But for me, there's no such thing as bad communication in English. If people are communicating English about gaming, and it's engaging them with the language, and they're using it, they're learning different ways to express their ideas, they're communicating. Like what you said there about your engineering school, that filled my heart with joy and happiness. The idea of walking into a room with all these nationalities, voluntarily speaking in English. I wouldn't want to kind of impose anything on that. I think that's a wonderful thing in itself. And like Nira says, it's a world language. It belongs to everyone, and there are different purposes. Of course, there are situations for work and everything else where you have limitations and where you have to use standard forms. But I think we underestimate people. I think people are aware of that. And if they're not, it's quite easy to kind of, bring it up. But I mean, there are lots of kind of TikTok videos and things like that of Gen Z people at work kind of speaking in some way. I'm sure it can happen. People can use different language, and it might be inappropriate at times. But I think it's a very small thing that's easily overcome. I think people learn in your own language. You switch all the time between...
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, online in social media, you often see people criticizing each other's use of English. And we're talking about native speakers. That it's not written like that, or you've missed an apostrophe there. And so there's such large variation in the way native speakers use their own language. Who owns English? I don't know if our listeners know that there is no body that actually officially controls the English language, like perhaps I think in French, France has an institution that is the official body that makes all the rules or says whether a word's allowed or not. That doesn't exist in English.
Yeah, okay. We're currently filming in France, hence the I think the French reference potentially. I don't know.
Well, also because they are the only kind of yes. The only
Are they? Are they the only?
Well, it's the only
Spain
one.
has a Real Academy de Español, and they produce the official grammar and the dictionary, and words are officially authorized or not, based on what they say. And it's a group of people who are academics and experts in the language. But
do people pay attention to it?
Sometimes yes, because the rules are what is applied in certain contexts, academic contexts, and the official government bulletins and reports that come out. Whether a word is accepted or not, it depends on what these people say.
So we're kind of drifting away a little bit from social media, thinking that. And just to bring it back, you know, basically, I understand what you're saying, and you're absolutely right. You know, if your goal is to become a doctor and to study medicine in English and to practice as a doctor in English, obviously your needs are going to be very different from somebody whose goal is to progress in World of Warcraft or something like that. That's fine, but one helps the other in my experience. You know, the fact that the beautiful thing about social media for me, the reason that I love it, is because it does connect people and it gives them a chance to communicate about what they're passionate about, what they're interested in. And it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like they're studying. It's like you were saying earlier about inadvertent learning.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going there necessarily to learn English, but they're using English and learning English, and the impact is tremendous. I've seen it, you know, in students.
And quite a common thing, I mean, even my students to this day say to me, I wish I could practice more English, practice more speaking, practice more writing. Well, with social media, it gives you that opportunity to practice with live, you know, real people in front of you. You're not practicing with a machine.
That's the big question that we get online on our social media channels all the time. I have no one to practice with, you know, and we have to say to them, you're practicing right now.
As you write, as you
know,
type.
and it does transfer. You know, you might only be typing comments and stuff like that, but that does support your speaking and everything else, and all of your kind of familiarity and fluency in English. It does help, you know.
So we have lots of content coming out. So one way to practice is go and watch it all and write your comments in the
absolutely.
I will reply to them as well.
Yeah, you do. So I have one question that I wanted to get on, which I think will be. So, what do you think if you had learners? So learners are watching this video.
We hope.
What would be one thing that you would say is brilliant about the way that they can use, and you've kind of touched on this already, but just in a one-liner, brilliant about social media and using social media to help them learn English, and one thing that they need to be wary of? So if you could give me one each, basically. So Neil, one thing that's brilliant about it and one thing that they need to be wary of, and same for you, Niraj.
For me, the thing that's brilliant about it is the flexibility, is the fact that there's a whole range. However you want to interact, you can interact. You know, I love TikTok, you know. I know it's embarrassing for a man of my age, but I can't help it. I love it. And, you know, for me, to spend half an hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes doing that,
Neil.
it's a joy, it's a pleasure, so that's a great thing. But other people might be, you know, interested in other things. They might be on Reddit, they might be on Instagram, they might be on X. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to practice, whenever you want to kind of engage in that way, you can do it. And you can follow, like I said earlier, your passion or your interest. That's the good thing. I mean,
what could be more convenient than pulling out your phone
exactly.
when you're on the bus?
You've got your phone out anyway.
You know, just listen to a podcast or a reply to a comment on somebody's post.
Yeah, so the flexibility, anytime, anywhere, whatever platform you want to go with that.
Something to be wary of, yeah.
Well, there
this is going to be really hard for Neil.
It is. I'm a bit, you know, super positive in this, but there are, of course. I mean, one of the things that we have problems with is it's not specifically related to language learning, but obviously misinformation and amplifying negative behavior and so on. That can certainly happen, and I think it's something that people younger than me, which is everyone, let's face it, are better at kind of doing and navigating than we give people credit for. But there is a risk, and there's a risk of misinformation, even in terms of language teaching. I see some content which is factually incorrect.
So how can they be aware of that? Like, how can you be wary of that? If you're watching it, you don't know the grammatical principle of something. Like, how do you know, okay, this person I should be listening to, this person I shouldn't be, specifically with English language learning?
Well, that's the same skills as kind of discerning any kind of information from the internet. You know, you would check the source of the information, who's making it, what kind of credentials they have. Is it somebody who's got a long career in English language teaching and producing this kind of material? How many people are in? The kind of people that endorse them as well? There's a kind of a whole list of factors. I'm sure I'm missing out a few things, but looking at those kind of things tells you the quality of the information you're being given, and also contrasting what you're hearing or what you're looking at with what other people say as well. And if you see that they coincide, they're saying the same thing, it's probably something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
So it is a risk. I mean, you're right. People don't necessarily have the time or the motivation to dig in and kind of say, is this person a good provider? Is this content really good or not? They just kind of go through that. But to an extent, I mean, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about there not being any bad way to interact. Even if you're doing that, the more you do it, the more you experience things like that. There's a lot of self-policing goes on. Like you said earlier about people criticizing their own language, things like that. You do get things like that popping up from time to time and people going, that's not true, that's rubbish. And we even get it we get people popping up on our websites telling us we're wrong, which we aren't. But, then we have to speak to them and say, I understand where you're coming from, them, but actually, and it kind of works.
And what about you, Neeraj? One brilliant and one...
You just reminded me of something I did with a couple of students, and a little while ago, one of my students, I got her to create a blog where she was posting audio of her English speaking, answering questions over the course of a couple of years. And so I said, by the end of the 2 years, you'll be able to listen back to how you started and then listen to your progress. And, these things were made public and posted and generally the comments were good, but sometimes there were some comments that weren't that nice. And I think that's a problem with social media, that if you put yourself out there, you make yourself vulnerable, you can get trolled. And
what a good idea, though, for learners to do that, to document I don't know how many, do you often tell your students to do that? Or was it just, okay.
I mean, the idea came from it was a teacher's conference I went to, and the speaker said, we get lots of writing and it's easy to correct, you've got a record, but what about speaking? Yeah. What's the record of speaking? Well, record. Everyone's got a phone.
That's good.
And to add another dimension to it, why not publicize it and make it available, and then other people can listen to it and you get feedback from a much wider variety. And so I went with that idea and did some experiments. So coming back to the idea of trolling and negative feedback, I mean, that is something that social media has that risk. And then there's kind of psychological impacts of that as well. If you a lot of influencers complain of being quite heavily trolled, and that affects their mental health.
Okay, thank you so much. I have one thing that I really would love to get your thoughts on.
Okay.
Which one should I go for? What based on, so both of you spend a lot of time, as we said, on social media right now as part of your jobs. So what trends do you foresee, say in the next 5 years, of English language learners, of how English language learners use social media to learn English, but in the next 5 years? How do you see them using it? That's not happening currently, but little things that you're seeing.
That's a good question.
It's a difficult question because
one.
prediction in this field is so difficult. Because 5 years ago, nobody would have predicted TikTok.
Yeah, true.
And it's taken over the world. And 2 years ago, nobody would have predicted ChatGPT, and it's taken over the world.
That's right.
So
it's a tough one, but that's why I'm going to let Neeraj go first.
I don't know. I think a lot more people would be incorporating AI to the way they use social media, having their posts checked automatically. Perhaps, I think the difficulty is going to be really knowing whether what you're listening to is real, whether it's been created by a person or it's been put together. So we're going to hear a lot better quality of English because everything will be checked and filtered and
Do you think that's going to create a separation between what they can actually do then?
Yeah.
In
What's
like a
the
real
reality?
life?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What reality? And then it could change expectations as well, and
Interesting.
How people feel they should present themselves in English, how real they can be. This is what I think.
That's so interesting. How about you, Neil?
I mean, there's a couple of issues there that I was kind of thinking of. Social media itself, I would say, is largely a kind of democratizing kind of thing. In that, people, we have audiences from every country in the world. When we have this, it doesn't matter about the income level and so on and everything. We just have, it basically has penetrated most of the world at this point, at some point. But when you talk about technology and when you talk about actual devices and so on, then you've got a risk of different, obviously income and, accessibility to things where expense and cost comes in, then becomes an issue that could be difficult. Because what I think is going to be the big change is the technology. I don't think it's going to be necessarily, platforms change all the time. Facebook has gone up, down, TikTok zoomed up. That will continue to change. And, there will be new channels, new platforms that we don't know now that will take over. But I think the technology that we use to interact with it is going to be a big deciding factor. There's been lots of failed things so far with your Google Glass glasses, and smart glasses, and the recent AI pin thing that kind of didn't do very well, and so on. But at some point, there's going to come a device. We're not always going to be using our phone for this, and at some time the barrier is going to come down. I think where your ability to interact with social media is going to be like always on. No, really easy to do at any point. I don't know what it's going to be. But that will be a fundamental change, I think, because then what you're talking about there, people will be checking and working that all the time, constantly, without having to go to a laptop or a phone or anything like that. But that, because of the fact that there will be cost involved, and of course, then you've got the risk of developing, a two-tier or more multi-tier society where a lot of people don't have access to that equipment, and then you've got something that's different.
So interesting. Thank you so much. That's been a really interesting conversation. Lots of food for thought.
Can we finish on an up? That seems like we're finishing on a bit of a down there.
End on, you have one up sentence that you can give. Go for it.
Honestly, my sentence would be just don't be afraid. It's always, one of the things is people are shy or nervous about participating, and a lot of people read and watch, but they don't participate. And I think, we don't judge people, we don't correct people or anything like that. We just want people to communicate.
To talk, to write.
So just follow our channels, just go on and just jump in. If you've got a question, ask it. Doesn't matter how, you might think it's a silly question, you might think, I should know this. Forget it, just do it. And if somebody says something and you want to respond, do it.
How about you, Niraj?
A real testament to social media. When me and Neil do these live classes on Fridays, we always begin with a question saying, where is everybody connected from? Please tell us in the comments. And we get people from Mongolia, Japan, North Africa, Middle East, Latin America, and it's just incredible. All these different countries, everybody's connected all together, all learning English, all joining us for this 1 hour class, all about learning, writing for an exam. And it's really heartwarming to see this community of people who are supporting each other and ready to participate. So I think that's real positive of social media and what it can do.
We've had people join us from Everest Base Camp. That's just fantastic.
So see if you can top that. If you're somewhere, I don't know how you can top that based on the moon. I don't know. Super interesting conversation. If you've enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe to our podcast or our YouTube channel, because we have lots more podcasts coming out, videos coming out, and we're going to be talking about some really fascinating topics. So thank you, Neil, Niraj.
Thanks to you, Nishma.
See y'all soon.
Take care.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening. We really care about your English, so if you like this episode, make sure you subscribe, because we've got lots more great content for you to explore.